We're trying to keep to a tight schedule, so I guess I'll start, even though I know there's a lot of people still waiting to get their drinks, and that's okay. My name is Greg Nagel, and today I want to talk about the past, present, and future of Munki. And so you don't have to scribble down links or take photos of the slides. You can take one right now, and then you don't have to do it for the rest of the presentation. And this just links to my blog, and I've put all the URLs from today in one spot, so you don't have to scribble those all down. Now, it's possible that some of you are unfamiliar with Munki, and so just thought I'd introduce it quickly. It's a software management tool for macOS, and it allows an admin to manage the installs and removals of software on macOS, and it has a friendly App Store-like user interface, but it wasn't always as polished as it is today. So let's look at Munki's past. As you might know, I work for Disney Animation in Burbank, California, and I started there in 2001. This was a typical Mac used back then, running macOS 9. We managed those Macs with FileWave, and that was not the logo for FileWave in 2001. That was. But when we were ready to move to macOS 10, FileWave really didn't have a product that worked on OS 10. So I had to look for an alternative. And I had been hanging out on the Mac Enterprise mailing list that was hosted by Penn State University. And I'd heard about this thing called Radmind, which some university lab administrators were using to manage their Macs. And what was cool when I heard about it was, oh, it's open source. That means it's free. So I could probably get a copy of it and start playing with it, and I didn't have to worry about getting funding or talking to sales organizations or any of that sort of thing. It was just something that was kind of low risk that I could bring it in and I could play with it and see if I could make it work for us. And Radmind was my first real hands-on experience with true open source software on the Unix platform. And it really opened my eyes to the community and the philosophy and the appeal of open source. And if you look at that list under Unix philosophy there's nothing there that probably strikes you as amazing or incredible, but none of that was actually the norm for software running on macOS 9 at that time. I was using, FileWave was this way, but much software was sort of this closed box, this black box. You didn't have any visibility into how it operated. And if it didn't work as you expected, you couldn't really dig in and figure it out. You had to call support and hope that they knew something. And so moving to something that used the Unix philosophy where the input was text and it output text to tell you what it was doing, and it wrote to log files, and the source code was available that you could take a look at it, and the developers, you could talk directly to them. I mean, when's the last time anybody's talked directly to an Apple developer? It just doesn't happen, right? So having that, available, it was like drugs into my system. It was like, oh my God, this is so powerful. This is so cool. And I ramble on about that because it's important because Radmind then influenced Munki and how it was developed and some of its features. And Radmind worked okay for what we were doing. It served us for several years, at least up until about macOS 10 Leopard. And we even did macOS upgrades using Radmind. But as we moved on, things started changing. The macOS was changing. Our needs were changing. We were getting more laptops. We had more developers, people that wanted more individual setups for their machines. And so it was kind of pushing us away from Radmind. Radmind was really no longer meeting our needs. So by 2008, I would say, I was aware we really needed to find a replacement. We can't use Radmind any longer. I looked for some more open source tools, really didn't find anything that was going to work for us. I had heard about this thing called Casper, and that sounded really cool, but unfortunately, I came to the realization that we needed something new too late for the budget cycle. So, we have to get our ideas or our plans in very early in order to make it to the budget cycle, which then allows us to purchase things starting, in October, and then there's a whole budget year. So this was like, in the summer, like, crap, we got to move, but it was too late to get in the budget, so I was going to have no budget to buy a replacement. That's a problem. Similarly, or at the same time, important to know that our studio had used, and continues to use this day, Python all over the studio, because it's a scripting language that is very well supported in the visual effects industry and the digital animation industry. And so there was a lot of people who knew Python, people who wrote Python in our building. But again, early 2000s, the most common sysadmin type scripting language was either bash scripting or even Perl. In fact, some of my first work that I did at Disney Animation was writing a bunch of Perl scripts. But at that time, I didn't know Python at all. The only thing I knew was that Python really relied on white space and indentation, and that was so important that if you got the indentation messed up, the code would run completely differently or would crash or wouldn't do the right. That sounded insane to me. I mean, who would design a language like that? One tab in the wrong place and now your code runs completely differently. But my boss had come to our team and said, the rest of the studio is using Python. I think it would be really good if our team started using Python as well and kind of transitioned all of our sort of internal scripts and tools from Perl to Python. And for me, I can't learn a new computer language just by like reading documentation and running the little introduction programs that come with a lot of languages. I have to like build something with it. I have to have a project. So I need to learn Python. I need a new tool for managing macOS 10. Yeah. So that's what I did. I used Munki as an excuse to learn Python, or maybe I learned Python so I would have the ability to write Munki. It doesn't really matter. But those two things were very closely connected, that the fact that I was being pushed into learning a new computer language then pushed me to do this sort of thing. And I started experimenting. I tried to figure out how to get Python to call external tools like the command line installer, Apple's software update tool. I had to figure out how can I use Python to like query a package and find out what its parts are and what version it is and does it need a restart, stuff like that. And I don't have any of the very first code I wrote, but this is due to the loveliness of having Git and version control. This is as far back as I could get in the Git repo, and that's some of the very first code in late 2008 that's still there. Names have changed, functions but it's amazing to me how many things that are there from the very beginning are still kind of there in some form today. And while I was experimenting, I'd been talking online with various Mac admins that I knew, telling them about what I was trying to do and getting some ideas and stuff. And at Macworld San Francisco in 2009, I was chatting with Nigel Kirsten. And I was telling him about this thing I was building, and he was really supportive. And he said, what you should do is you should make it open source, and you should make a Google Code site, and you should make a mailing list on Google Groups so that people can, we can discuss the software together. And it's probably not surprising he made those specific recommendations because at the time he was working for Google as a systems administrator and he was managing their Mac fleet. But before I could make a Google Code site or start a Google group, I had to come up with a name for the project. And I have no recollection at all how I came up with this name. I just know that it sounded fun, and it sort of evoked in my mind helper monkeys. That we have these little monkeys that go around and help us do our job. I don't know why I spelled it dorky like that, no idea. But, so, came up with a name, and then before I could do the Google Code site, I had to go to my manager and go, okay, I'm working on this management tool for macOS 10 in Python, and I'd like to make it open source. And my manager went, okay. And that was the entire way we made Munki open source. It was like super easy, right? If I were to try to do that today, there would be months of meetings, corporate legal would be involved, they'd have to do some sort of like review to make sure that name wasn't being used by something else. It would just be this really huge thing, and it probably wouldn't even happen. It wouldn't be worth it, because I wouldn't want to spend that political capital trying to get that done. So, hooray for ignorance. We didn't know any better back then. But I did take Nigel's advice. I created the Google Code home for Munki, started a Munki dev Google group, and the original URL still works. It redirects or points to the current GitHub site for Munki, but it's still around. The Wayback Machine, this is the oldest thing I could find in the Wayback Machine of what the Google Code site looked like. And what's kind of cool is even that far back, we already had a few people helping out and contributing stuff. First post to the Munki dev group in January 2009. And let's go back to Radmind for a moment. I mentioned earlier that Munki was very heavily influenced by Radmind. And let's look at some of those influences. Obviously, like Radmind, Munki is open source. And that was important because I really liked the Radmind community. I liked being able to talk to the developers. I liked being able to chat with other people that were using the tool, and I liked not having the pressure of, oh, this is, we have to justify these features by how much revenue they're going to generate, all that fun stuff. I didn't like that at all, but I wanted Munki to have something similar along those lines. And as best as I could at the time, I tried to embrace the Unix philosophy with small tools that do one thing, tools that take text as input and give text as output, and log to text files, right? That was not common even back then for commercial software to have that kind of clear logging. But the most important thing, the most important influence, I think, that came out of Radmind was the concept of desired state. So the idea here, at least from Radmind's perspective, is Radmind had text files that described the state of the file system. And then every time Radmind ran on a client, it would do its best to try to get the local file system to match that state. And so you didn't have to find machines that were not the way you want and then issue commands to get them the way you want. It was sort of an ongoing process where every time the client ran, it did its best to get that. And I wanted that same sort of desired state process in Munki. A key reason of mine for making Munki open source was I really wanted to be able to work with other Mac admins. At my organization, it was maybe me and part-time a few other people that touched the Mac. And so it was a very small group of people. I wanted to be able to get ideas and help from a much larger community. So that was another appeal of making it open source, is I would have access to a larger group of people. And that group actually sort of assembled itself very, very quickly. And they started contributing ideas and code and testing implementations, bug reports, all that stuff that I wouldn't have gotten nearly the volume or the quality of if it had just been on my own. So I want to look at a few examples of community contributions over the years. When I was first developing Munki, and it's kind of still true a little bit to this day, Disney Animation, people think of Disney as this huge company, and it is. But Disney Animation really is one building in Burbank, California. And it certainly was back at that time. So all of my clients were in that same building, inside a firewall-protected corporate network. So I didn't use any sort of client authentication at all. I mean, we implicitly trusted the machines on our network to talk to the web servers on our network. That wasn't. So there was no client authentication. But obviously, if you go into other environments, that isn't necessarily good. You want to have some sort of authentication. And Brian Warsing, who at the time worked for Simon Fraser University in Vancouver, he wanted better client authentication. He worked at a university. And he wanted to make sure that the clients that he could trust, that they were allowed to talk to his server. Universities tend to have these annoying little chaos demons called students that like to break things, and so he wanted some more, another level of authentication and security. So he designed and built the very first implementation of client certificate authentication for Munki, and contributed the code, and he even wrote documentation for it. Thank you. That was, I think that was one of the first really big outside of me and other people working at Disney, it was the first big outside contribution to Munki. But I'll give you some more examples. Munki originally used Python 2's included URL lib libraries to talk to web servers. They're not easy to work with, and this was Python 2, and so they were really, they were missing a lot of features. They didn't do well with HTTPS, and so we switched to using curl. And that worked pretty well for a while, but then Apple's curl kind of got behind the curve, and there was more and more problems which you could solve by installing your own curl to some other path. But I really wanted something that would just kind of work out of the box. I didn't want to tell people, well, in order to make Munki work, you need to do this, and then you need to go download curl from this other place and install that. So it was important to me that I find something that sort of out of the box, macOS 10, it would make Munki work well with web servers out there. And Michael Lin suggested using Apple's NS-URL connection, which is part of macOS's built-in Cocoa frameworks. And Mike was like super great help in figuring out how to get Python through PyObject-C to talk to Apple's frameworks. And we worked together on that for a few months, and eventually that's got shipped in Munki, and that's what Munki still uses to this day, is it uses Apple's Cocoa frameworks for talking to web servers. If you're not familiar with Frogger at all, you give him an interesting problem, especially if it has anything to do with macOS or with Python, and he'll go away and chew on it and work on it. He's very easy to nerd snipe. A lot of fun to do that. Another example. Again, in the early days of Munki, most Munki admins hosted their repo on just an internal web server that they might have. A lot of people were using macOS 10 server as their web server. More sane people were using Linux, and then more unfortunate people were using IIS on Windows. But it was usually an internal server, just inside their company. But then came the cloud. And now, instead of running your own server, you could just write a big check every month, and then you could host your repo like on Amazon or Google or Microsoft's clouds. And Wade Robson wanted to host his Munki server in AWS, specifically in an S3 bucket. So he developed an implementation of middleware, which is a customizable way you can teach Munki how to talk to your cloud provider. This allowed Wade specifically, but now all Munki admins can use Amazon, Google, Azure, other cloud providers to host your repo. How many people here have their Munki repo in the cloud? So you can thank Wade for making that possible. It was weird. I saw that when he contributed this code, I was like, oh, this is really interesting, but I'll probably never use it. Again, because of we're all in one building sort of thing. And then, of course, the COVID pandemic came, and all of our people were no longer in one building. They had all spread out to their houses, and some people moved out of the state and that sort of thing. And now suddenly, a single web server sitting inside our corporate network, inside our building, became a problem. And so I moved our repo out into the Amazon cloud so that our users at home could get updates and new software in a timely manner without having to VPN into our network, which they did in order to do their work, but it wasn't as scalable. And we also, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, had this really limited bandwidth going in and out. And it was nice to not have to push gigabytes of Office updates over that VPN bandwidth out to our clients, and instead use AWS for that. I'll give you yet another example. When Munki first came out, we had File Vault 1, which only encrypted the user's home directories. But by the time Lion shipped and Apple introduced File Vault 2, now the entire startup disk is encrypted. And this presented some problems if Munki had to restart a machine after installing software. Because normally, if you reboot a machine with File Vault, it doesn't boot all the way into the macOS. It stops at this screen that allows you to unlock the disk. And if nobody's sitting there to unlock the disk, after a while it gives up and shuts the machine down so it doesn't run the battery all the way down or get too hot or whatever. But the machine is no longer accessible. And that was a problem for Wesley Whetstone. So he wrote some code that allowed Munki to do what is called a File Vault authorized restart. And now that allows Munki to potentially install software, reboot the machine, and the machine then can come all the way back up into macOS and all the way to the login window and even into the user's account instead of stopping at that File Vault unlock screen. Now, as you probably know, the core Munki tools are command line, and that also means that the admin tools are command line as well. So it was a very common request very early on, is there a Munki GUI? Is there a GUI that will help me administer my repo? And Hannes Jutilanian is a Mac sysadmin who works for a university in Finland. And he sent me an email in early 2010, and he mentioned that he was working on a GUI for Munki. And several months later, he sent me a very, very early version to test and play around with. And so I did, on my live production repo. And it trashed my live production repo. It was a complete disaster. This was not Hannes's fault at all. I should not have been putting some very early development version and using it on production data. Thankfully, I had backups and that sort of thing, and I was able to recover. But both Hannes and I learned very important things from that experience. And when Hannes later was having people test alphas, he was very careful to tell people, do not use this on a repo that doesn't have backups. But over the years, Munki Admin has matured to a really, really useful tool for Mac admins. People here using that as well, Munki Admin? Yeah. Another type of GUI is a web interface. And several people wrote various web front ends or reporting consoles for Munki. Reporting is a feature that's not part of the core Munki tools, but it's obviously something that's very important to people to know what's going on. So this was important, sort of an important contribution to the Munki ecosystem to have these reporting tools. And one of the first web consoles was Jordan Rain's Munki on Rails, which was later renamed Munki Server. And later, Per Olofsson created a web-based reporting console, which he called Munki Report. And he has since kind of pulled that from the market. But it inspired and influenced several other web-based tools for Munki, including Arjen van Bakhoven's Munki Report PHP, which now has been renamed back to just Munki Report, and Graham Gilbert's Sal. Graham's right here. So if you use Sal, say hi. And I wouldn't be surprised if most Munki admins are using one or the other of these tools. I mean, there are other ways to get reporting, but it really, in talking to people, this sounds like very common that for Munki admins to be using one of these two tools to get reporting info from their Munki clients. And if you haven't seen it, here's what Sal looks like. Is anybody using Sal? Oh, good. Graham's using Sal. That's good. I'm glad. And is anybody using Munki Report? Because this is what Munki Report looks like. Tom's using both. So, and then Tom also probably, and Jump Cloud is something else altogether. And so you're weird, Tom.
It's not my. Jump Cloud does not run on this.
Yeah, I didn't think so, but who knows? Anyway, if you want to learn more about Munki Report, Alex Harvey has a presentation tomorrow. So I'm sure he's going to go into depth on that. And I don't know if it's well known, but Google was a really important early adopter of Munki. It was really incredibly validating to know that Munki was good enough to help manage what was probably the largest deployment of Macs at that time. And I think that helped encourage other organizations to try out Munki, because like, oh, well, if Google's using it, it can't be complete crap. It was, but but we fooled people. And the folks in the Google Mac Ops group were really, really important. This isn't the whole group, but there were more people in it. But at that time, this was some of the key people in that group. And they submitted code, wrote tools, did testing and feedback, bug fixes, code review, code sanitizing, and in general just made the project much more robust, much more professional than I would have ever been able to do on my own. And after all, they were really highly motivated because they were running it on a huge fleet. So if there was some issue that affected like 1% of machines, that was over 1,000 machines that were having these problems. And so they were extremely motivated to fix these things. And Google Mac Ops was also responsible for the feature that forces installs after a certain date and time, because they really needed that to ensure that important security fixes got out in a reasonable time frame. And they also developed an open source Simian, which is yet another web front end or web console for managing a Munki repo and Munki clients. And for me, the key thing is that Google gave Munki sort of a respectability out there in the real world that it may not have gotten so quickly. So I'm always very appreciative of them jumping in that early and adopting it. They don't use it now anymore. They wrote their own thing, but it was a nice ride while it lasted. Now, in my opinion, probably the most important thing in the Munki ecosystem is auto package. And if you're not familiar with auto package, if Munki automates the deployment of software to your Mac clients, then auto package automates the download and import of software into Munki. And if you're like me, you first get Munki up and running, and it's super exciting when you get that first piece of software imported into your Munki repo and you see it going out to your clients. That's really cool. And then when you've imported the latest version of Firefox for the 6 millionth time, you're like, this is really boring and tedious, and I really want something, anything, to automate this for me. And I was in that situation. And I looked around, and there were a few people who were working on automating Munki imports, but I really liked the work that Per Olofsson was doing. So I started contributing to the auto package project, and Tim Sutton joined a few years later, not a few years, like a month or two later, and Nick and Elliot a few years after that. And besides sort of working on the auto package code itself, there are dozens and dozens, maybe hundreds of Mac administrators writing auto package recipes, auto package processors, and in general making sure that there are auto package recipes for so many things that you can automate and not now have to babysit that every day. I get an email every morning from my auto package run, and it tells me what new things have been added, and it's just great to just go, hey, this computer did this for me. I didn't have to go find this stuff and import it. It's just a huge time saver. So if you haven't looked at if you use Munki, and even if you don't use Munki, because auto package works with other software deployment tools, if you haven't looked at auto package, you really owe yourself to do that. And there's much, much more contributors over the years. There's so many talented Mac admins that have donated their time and knowledge and effort to improving Munki or building additional tools to use with Munki or to extend its capabilities. And there's more than this. These are ones I could find pictures of and remember things about. But there's more. So what about the present? Let's look at what's new in the current major release of Munki and what is happening in the world of Munki right now. Current release of Munki is version 6.3.1, and let's look at the major new features there. Munki 6 added a feature to assist with installing macOS or upgrading macOS on Apple Silicon Macs. The way we did it before wouldn't work because with Intel Macs, a root process can upgrade macOS, but on Apple Silicon, being root isn't enough. You have to have a user that is a volume owner's credentials to do an upgrade. So the new feature in Munki 6 stages the macOS installer in the applications folder. If necessary, it temporarily adds admin rights to the user's account, and then it just launches the app, and then the user can upgrade macOS the same way they would an unmanaged Mac or a Mac that they have at home. Another new feature added in Munki 6.1 is default installs. And traditionally, there are two classes of software items in a manifest. There's managed installs. These are items that the admin has decided a machine must have. The user really has no control over these, and they can't remove them. The second is optional installs, and these are entirely under the user's control. They are not installed unless the user chooses them, and the user can remove them if they like. So it's really tempting to make as many things as possible optional installs so that the user has the control, but this can really lead to a poor new user experience. You know, they get their first day at work, they get their new Mac, they're eager to get started, and now they got to sit and download Office and install that, and Chrome and Zoom and all of these apps, and like, what does IT even do? They didn't do anything for me. I'm doing all this work. So, and additionally, you may have installed software that they don't even use, and now they're getting these update notifications for some software that they don't even care about, but they can't remove it because you made it a managed install. So default installs let you have the best of both worlds here. Items here will be installed by default because you've decided that that's what they should have by default, but immediately the control is handed back to the user, and the user can then opt out. And we use this, we're using this right now to allow users to opt out of a few of the Office apps. We're not an Exchange shop, and so there's several of the Office apps that nobody really uses. And so they can just remove them. And I'm going to expand this. I think probably we'll even let them remove Word and Excel if they'd like, and some of the other apps that traditionally we've installed for everybody, but not necessarily everybody uses. And one of the great things about this new feature is you can very easily migrate current managed installs into default installs. You just edit a manifest, and the next time Munki runs, the item is now available for the user to delete if they want. It's not disruptive at all. macOS Ventura, Ben mentioned it a little bit in the previous one, introduced a new privacy protection feature called App Management. And this can affect Munki and other management tools. And you may see Apple's privacy controls referred to as TCC, which stands for Transparency, Consent, and Control. You might see the acronym PPPC, which I think is, I've got it here, Privacy Preferences Policy Control. I don't know why there's all these acronyms, but they're all basically the same thing. So if you see that, that's what we're talking about here. This new privacy protection feature limits which processes can modify, update, or delete application bundles. And so if you hear that, you might understand why that might cause some problems with Munki. The problems we've seen so far, hard to trigger, they're pretty rare, but they do happen. And in certain circumstances, Munki can be prevented from updating or installing software. But like other privacy protections, Apple did give us some management tools here. You can install a configuration profile via MDM that grants certain processes this right. So you can say, I want to grant Munki the right to manage software updates or update application bundles. But the problem is that Munki's a term. The tool that does the updating, managed software update, isn't a binary, it's a Python script. And you can't really sign a Python script effectively. What you'd have to do is sign Python and then give Python the rights to do that. But now anybody that's using that Python for their scripts now inherits those rights as well. So that didn't seem like the right way to go. I was pretty certain that we could probably just write a wrapper binary, a compiled binary that called the script, and we could sign that and give that rights. And I played with that idea. I'd use it successfully in some other contexts, but I played with that idea with Munki for several months and had people helping. And we just couldn't get it to work in every context that Munki normally runs in. But in January of this year, Corey Prince contacted me on the Mac admin Slack, and he asked a few questions about this problem, and it soon became really, really clear that he had done way more research, and he really understood this a lot better than I did, and he understood responsible processes and how that chain works and all that sort of thing. And even better, he figured out how to make the wrapper work for all of the contexts in which managed software update can be called. Per Olofsson helped out a little bit, and we kind of threw code back and forth, and the result shipped in Munki 3. So now we have a compiled binary. You can create a TCC configuration profile, but every time there's a new release of Munki, the ad hoc signature on that managed software update binary is going to change, so you would have to change you'd have to make a new configuration profile for each release, and that's not great. So the right solution, of course, is to sign that shim, that wrapper, with a stable developer ID. And there's nothing stopping you from doing that. You can sign it with your own ID or your organization's ID. You're probably thinking, well, Greg, why didn't you sign it? And it's because it just doesn't feel very professional to have this important software on your fleet's machines that manages their Macs signed by some random guy named Greg Nagel. And I certainly didn't want people contacting me and going, hey, my organization has got this spyware on my computer and it's got your name on it. This was not a place I wanted to be. And, well, could Walt Disney Animation Studios sign it? I didn't even ask them, because if I'm not comfortable with this idea, I can't imagine that the people at my management at Disney would have been comfortable with that. So I felt like we're going to be stuck and just tell everybody, you're on your own, sign it. But two people in the Munki community came up with a much better solution, Nate Walk and Eric Gomez, and they worked together with the people responsible for the MacAdmins open source group. They are making signed and notarized builds of the Munki tools available here. And now they have a stable signature under the MacAdmins open source, and you can make a TCC profile, and you shouldn't have to update it. I can't tell you you'll never have to update it, but you won't have to update it very often, let's just say that. So it's a very good solution. And one more thing that's happened very recently, the reason it became okay to allow the MacAdmins open source group to sign Munki was that Walt Disney Animation Studios is no longer supervising the Munki project. That sounds scary, but this is something that I wanted, something I asked for, and something I got buy-off on just very recently. So what does it mean, really? It's really just an acknowledgement of the reality, which is Disney Animation provided resources, mostly me, to work on Munki, but they've never really actively supervised it. They don't care about it that much. It's not core to Walt Disney Animation Studios' business. So I will continue to work on Munki. I'm not, the fact that Disney Animation is not the supervisor doesn't mean no changes there. But now we can bring in additional people that don't work for Disney, and we can give them leadership roles in the Munki organization, and we don't have to run that past Disney. And I think that's a good thing for the future of Munki. And I'm over time, but I'm going to plow through this future bit too. This brings us to the future, right? And we could talk a little bit about the technical future of Munki, but I'm not really good at predicting where things are going to go and what we're going to need. You can see a few ideas here of stuff that I'm pretty sure is going to happen and stuff that might happen. But I would love to hear your ideas. What do you want to see in Munki's future from a technical perspective? What features, what changes need to happen? But in the meantime, I'm far more interested in the organizational future of Munki. Who will be working on Munki in the future? Even GitHub is not happy that there's only one owner for the Munki project. We need to identify at least one other person that could take over at least that part of it if I get hit by a bus. And the buses drive on the wrong side of the street here, and I keep looking the wrong direction, and so the chances of me getting hit by a bus out there are not low. So let's make that a future goal. And in a similar vein, I want more people recognized as contributors and maintainers of the Munki code. And this will happen gradually over time. I don't really know how best to proceed, and I'm hoping other people have some ideas what we could do here. But I think that's important. Now, you might be thinking this. You're sitting there going, I don't know what to do here, but I'm interested in this anyway. There are wikis to be edited. There's tons of stuff that could be done there. It needs to be reorganized. It's kind of grown over time, but the organization is bad. There's great documentation on how to get started, but not very much documentation what to do next. What's the next step after you've started? So there's a lot of work that could be done there. You can help out in the Munki community by answering questions. The Munki Discuss Google group has 650 members. The MacAdmin Slack Munki channel has over 4,500 members. They're not super busy mailing lists. There aren't tons of questions every day. But still, any help is appreciated. If somebody asks you a question you know the answer to, answer it. If you know where the wiki page is that'll answer the question, point them to that. And having people with different setups and experience is also super important. We at Disney don't use Azure, the Azure cloud, so I can't help somebody who has questions about how do I move my Munki repo into Microsoft Azure. I don't know, but maybe you do. So let's add those other goals to the list. Is there anything up there that you can help with? It'd be great if you did. A lot of people have helped make Munki what it is today, and this is certainly not all of them, but I hope that I've convinced you that Munki has always been a team effort, and that the future of Munki depends on that team. So, will you join us? Be one of us. And thanks for listening today. I did run over time. If there are questions, I'll be here all day today, all day tomorrow. Just find me in the hallway and ask. And I really want to hear what your ideas are about the future of Munki. Thank you.